I'm going to introduce our amazing speakers for the day. And you are in, just in case you don't know, an introduction to positive youth development theory and practice. And Rhonda Jackson has 6 years of experience as a substance abuse prevention specialist / coalition coordinator and 6 years in college recruitment. Rhonda now oversees technical assistance for 35 plus tie-in community partners, where she uses her expertise to assist them in building and strengthening meaningful youth adult partnerships with their organizations. She also assists with the curriculum development and co-facilitates the online TIAN Community Partner Learning Collaborative. And then we have Emily Neisser. So since 2015, Emily has been part of the Texas Healthy Adolescent Initiative for the State of Texas Department of State Health Services, which now implements the Texas Youth Action Network, which is TIAN. TIAN aims to spread positive youth development and youth adult partnerships across the state through trainings, technical assistance, and collaborative learning. Emily has served as a principal investigator on the project since 2019, and Emily oversees all aspects of the project, guiding curriculum and resource development. So with that, I will pass the mic over to you, Rhonda and Emily. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you, Paula. Okay, let's see if I can share my screen. And then I hope everyone can hear us and can see everything correctly. So as Paula said, I'm Emily Neisser and this is Rhonda. And we're super excited to just be here today to kind of get to start this conversation with you all about positive youth development. Paula did a really good job of introducing us, so I will just skip over that part. But just a little bit about us. We are from the Texas Youth Action Network, which is a program based out of Texas A&M University and aiming to support positive youth development through a variety of mechanisms like this, like doing trainings with you all. And today we just wanted to talk a little bit more about how we help kind of adults, caring adults, feel more prepared or better equipped to work with youth, to engage with youth, and to interact with youth. So that's a little bit, that's just kind of a screenshot about our website. I'll have our kind of information at the end if you want to connect with us further or beyond this presentation. We would love to hear from you. But we also want to make sure that we get a moment to kind of get to know you all too. We're going to be using Mentimeter to do so. So you can see there's little instructions up here about go to menti.com and use this code. We hope to kind of engage with you guys via Mentimeter through a couple different ways. One on static slides or slides where Rhonda and I are just presenting content. There's these cute little emojis in the corner with the hearts and the thumbs up and the question marks, and I believe the cat stands for being adorable. So if you feel like the slide content is particularly adorable, you know, feel free to give us a cat emoji. And then the other way, which you'll see in a second, is the polling question option. And this is just a great way to kind of get whole pulse of the audience in this kind of setting where it may be a little bit more difficult to speak out. Now, especially since we're kind of a smaller group today, we encourage y'all to speak out. If you want to put something into the chat, Paul will be kind of mediating it for us and keeping track. If you would like to unmute yourself to just share a story, we're going to strongly encourage that. And in fact, there's a couple of spots where we'll ask you to. So again, if you can just go to menti.com, the other nice thing is if it's on your phone, on your computer, you can progress with us through the presentation. So the little slides will pop up via Menti, and you can follow along with the polling questions. So with that, one of the things that we'd really like to know is what type of organization do you work for? What would you say is the term that best describes your organization? So we'll give you all a few seconds. Got some nonprofits right off the bat. Community boards. Anyone else? Okay, great. Ooh. I went too far. Okay, great. So we have a lot of experience working with different community organizations and nonprofits. We often kind of speak in that language or try to speak in that language. So hopefully we can have some really good advice for you all going forward. And this one's kind of fun. See if you can kind of mark on the map where you are at, either where you live, where you work. We assume everyone is in Texas, although I think in the last presentation we did have an out-of-stater from Arkansas. So if you are, you can put yourself kind of in the white space and then shout out where you're from. But we just like to see where folks are from. But again, from the Dallas-Fort Worth area or the outskirts of it. And you know, this doesn't have to be precise. I think when I try to use this myself, I usually end up putting myself about 60 miles west of where I'm meant to be, but it gives us a general idea. Oh, we have some East Texas, some Houston area. We didn't have Houston in the last session. So great, a little bit all over. Our Dallas area is representing. Or you guys get all the 2, 3 combined. You're representing. And then this particular question is select all that apply. So multiple of these might describe you, but how do you currently work with youth, engage with youth, interact with youth? Services, education. Some of y'all have a youth in a group. There we go, and all that exciting shifting all at once. Okay, if you select other, you have to give us a shout out in the chat box or speak out to go ahead and tell us what other. Who wants to share? Oh, you don't work with them. Okay, well, maybe you have an interest in working with them. Maybe by the end of this presentation, we'll convince you to work with them or get involved and engage with youth in some other capacity. That's fine. That's what the other is there for, to capture the situations that I will never, predict. But we have a lot of you that already have working with youth in a group, which is great. We have education, youth, providing services, and programming. Okay, so this leads in nicely to our next question. How familiar are you with the idea of positive youth development? Have you heard of this? You know a little bit about it, but not a lot, or you're super good at it and are going to be able to give us some great examples throughout the rest of the presentation and really participate alongside with us. Okay. You guys are also super fast at this. So I looked down and I realized we already have max participation. So it's funny. Okay, so we've got a portion of you who've never heard of this at all. So this will be brand new to you. Some of you have heard of this, or most of you have at least somewhat heard of this. And that's great. What we're going to do today, let me go to my next slide. What we want to do today is really just introduce positive youth development. And we break it down into kind of 3 kind of key components that we think are critical or kind of best describe what positive youth development looks like. Then we hope to turn it over to you all to kind of brainstorm how you can incorporate these things and address these things in your work. We understand you guys are kind of in special circumstances. You work with youth with where maybe some complex situations, some sensitive situations. So we really want to tap your expertise and figure out ways that you all can incorporate positive youth development into your work. I'll give you kind of the objective of the entire presentation is that by the end of the presentation, you have some kind of tips or steps or actions that you feel like you could implement at your organization going forward. So I'm gonna give you that challenge to kind of think about these things through the rest of the presentation. Rhonda and I are going to give you so many examples or thoughts about how you can approach these things. And I'd love to see what you all come up with as a way to tailor it to your specific situation and work. Okay. So what is positive youth development? So positive youth development kind of came out in the early 2000s, late 1990s, I guess. And prior to that, we often kind of thought of youth as always being on the precipice of about to screw up, right? we thought like, okay, youth are going to be exposed to drugs, youth are going to be exposed to risky situations. And the best way to deal with that is to just tell youth, don't do it, right? And so that drove a lot of the way we did programming, services, away a lot of the interactions between adults and youth were back then. It was just, no, don't do it. It's bad. You'll listen to me because I'm the adult, right? And what we realized is that doesn't always work. That we were kind of treating youth as if they were just solely there to listen to us, that they didn't have their own thoughts or their own potential or their own way of engaging with things, and that they would just listen to us because we were the adults and that was how it is. And so in the early 2000s is when we start seeing this shift towards positive youth development. And this is the idea that it's a way to kind of organize what we are doing, how we are engaging with youth, that recognizes they have their own potential, they have their own voice, they have assets and strengths and things that we can kind of embrace and build up to really kind of help them develop. So the important thing for us is that we really want y'all to take away is that positive youth development can be kind of incorporated into many ways that we interact with youth, whether it be programming or services or education. And again, it's just a living along the philosophy of bringing out their full potential and seeing them as an asset and as able to contribute to their own voice. We often say that the goal of positive youth development is more than prevention. While prevention, I like this quote, so I'm just going to read it directly. But while the prevention and remediation of young people's problems is critical, positive youth development does try to aim higher. Its goal is to foster in all young people physical and mental health, competence at school, work, and in the community, competence, character, and connectedness with their family and their peers. Another good way to say this is that the goal of positive youth development is to become a fully functioning adult, and to help youth become a fully functioning adult. Now, this little list over here on the right is intended to kind of drive home those characteristics of what we think a fully functioning adult means. And I always like highlighting this list because I think many of us could look at this list and say, well, I know some adults who can't really do all these things quite yet. But it just gives us an idea of how positive youth development is structured to hit these points, to kind of address each of these scenarios about being more self-sufficient, having healthier relationships with oneself or with their friends and their partners, and being kind of more engaged, involved in their community and being an active citizen. Luckily, you don't have to score 100% on the fully functioning adult test to become an adult, but it does kind of show you where positive youth development aims to help youth. Okay. And if I were to send you all out onto the internet to go Google positive youth development, you would probably really quickly find 1,000 different resources and ideas and models and frameworks. And there really are quite a few out there. We have things like the 5 or 6 C's, Hart's Ladder, which talks about engaging with youth, 40 developmental assets, and so on. It can almost be a little overwhelming or a little intimidating as you kind of try to wade through each of these models, figure out where they're different. The gist of it is they may use different terms for positive youth development. They may talk about engaging with youth in different manners, but they often kind of come down to the core components of spaces, safe relationships, and ways to engage with youth. So we're going to kind of drill it down and focus on those key components. The model that we selected for this presentation is the 8 features of a positive youth development program. We're going to go into these pretty in depth here in a few minutes, focusing on these big headlines of positive climate, connections, and meaningful engagement. So I'll kind of save my thoughts for when we get into them a little bit more closely. But again, the idea is that We have these safe spaces up here. We have safe, supportive relationships and positive relationships going forward, both youth to youth and their peers, and youth working with adults, and that we give them these opportunities to kind of engage and contribute meaningfully and develop their skills. So these are the three kind of domains that we're going to focus on going forward. And then this shows you kind of a good example of how they can be structured. This particular model likes to set up the positive climate as kind of the foundation. So making sure youth feel safe in their physical space, both from a physical standpoint and an emotional standpoint, that they have great structure, age-appropriate structure for how the interactions are formed, and that we see kind of norms, positive norms and rules being followed within the interactions, again, between youth with youth and between youth and adults. When it comes to relationships, it's also kind of important that we recognize youth have an opportunity to belong regardless of their gender, their race, the sexual orientation, that they feel connected with both their adults that they're working with and the youth, and that they're supported and feel the warmth and the caring. And then this just kind of attempts to summarize many of the benefits of positive youth development. There's been a lot of research done over the last few decades, and it's found that positive youth development has some really great outcomes associated with it. We often see improvement in social and emotional skills and attitudes. We see changes in academic performance, in academic skills, especially improvement in health outcomes and making healthier choices. In turn, this usually leads to reductions in risky behaviors. I also like to often point out that youth feel like they're a better part of their community. They feel more connected. They feel like their contributions matter and that their voice matters. It's also, this focuses on the youth, but I think it's also really helpful to point out that adults who work with youth through positive youth development tend to also see benefits. They feel more connected to the youth. They feel like they're giving back to their community more. They learn more about themselves and their strengths and their assets. Organizations and communities that kind of embrace positive youth development also tend to benefit because they have these programs and these services and these mechanisms of interacting with youth that are more attuned to what youth need, that are better prepared for those kind of things. So a lot of kind of broad, great benefits overall. And so now that I've maybe convinced you to learn a little bit more about positive youth development, to kind of embrace it as a model for your interactions with youth, you may be questioning like, all right, so how do I start? We often suggest starting with like a little assessment, a little self-reflection exercise. There are a lot of them out there. I pulled this one from the source down at the bottom. The one at the bottom, I think, has quite a few items in it. I only pulled about 10 or 12 that I felt really reflected some of the key things that we've been talking about today. This is in the handout that Hala mentioned, or you can take a few minutes to just make your notes in the margin if you would like. But the idea is that you read each item and kind of rate your organization on what it does well, what it's kind of getting started, but maybe not be there quite yet, right? May not have quite mastered it, or when it doesn't describe it at all. And the idea is that it helps you figure out what is your organization doing great, what are some of its strengths, and then also where can it focus its efforts, where, you know, maybe you're struggling with the way staff members interact with youth. And so that would be where you would want to put your efforts into. Or maybe you don't have enough great opportunities for the youth to participate or really feel like they're contributing their voice. So that's where you want to focus. So the idea is to just kind of give you a starting point, reflect for a few minutes. We also did this as a handout because we wanted you all to look at it maybe after this presentation is over too. We didn't want it to just put it up for half a second and you forget about it and next week you don't remember. So we're thinking that, you know, if you wanted to look at this, visit it now, revisit again in a week, maybe talk to some of the folks at your organization about some of their thoughts on these things. It could be a really great conversation starter on how to embrace positive youth development. But now we're going to just kind of jump right into that first component about building a positive climate. We're going to kind of talk about what that means, and then we want to turn it over to you all to hear about some of the things that you may have experienced, some of the challenges, and some of the strategies you all use to help build positive climates. So I'm going to turn over to Rhonda.
Hi guys, so I know that some of you are already working with youth and some of you may not be, but when you begin working with young people, there are two things that you should keep at the forefront when starting. The first one is just understanding the benefits of working with young people because they experience the world differently than we do. Their perceptions are different. When you decide that you're going to partner and work with young people, youth bring new ideas and connections to the groups and the projects that you all begin to do together. The other thing is that youth rejuvenate and motivate adults. I've never have I ever heard adults say, you know, the office is really bringing me back to work. No adult that is working with youth is saying that. And so just remember, they're going to bring an element of rejuvenation and motivation to the adults that work with them. And then they're going to strengthen an organization's connections to the community. The reason why is because youth understand what's going on in their community and they're in different environments. I think of community in two ways. So if you're talking about community where they live, yes, and the community where they go to school, yes, they know what's going on in their community. And so if there's some things that maybe the school has asked you about that's going on in the student body, they want you, well, how do we tackle this? Well, the expert to ask or the group that you're already meeting with. So those young people are going to strengthen those connections and those ideas and really bring a perspective of how to tackle certain issues. The other thing is that we have to do is get rid of negative stereotypes about young people. This is important because I've never approached anybody or worked with anybody. If they had a negative or a preconceived notion about someone, it's always hard to work with someone when you already have a preconceived notion about what they can't do, what they're capable of, what they're not capable of. And so we have to start with that from the beginning, and then expect what you would from an adult. If you're gonna get into a project where you're working with an adult, you're not expecting the adult to come in there with you and you tell them about the project and they have nothing to say. So that's not going to happen. So when you're deciding that you're going to partner with youth or you're going to be in a group with youth, be open to hear their ideas and just don't treat them like they're an inanimate object. They're there to have voice. They're there. They do have opinions, and they are willing to share if there's a floor for them to do that. Also, prepare to assure them that you're interested in their personal opinions and that you don't expect them to speak for all youth. So this is going to help you to not operate in manipulation, not operate in tokenism, and definitely not treat them as though they're just decoration. This is where we bring them in on the premise that we're going to include them and they're going to participate in decision making, and then we don't intentionally provide a space for them to do so. So the other thing is prepare to take the time to explain roles that you're going to take on. So you may get kids from a background where they've been very well prepared by their parents. They've been given a background, they've been given, they know how to present themselves, they know how to speak well, they're on time, they're ready to go. You got that. We're going to get those kinds of kids, but we're also going to get you that don't come from that background. So you have to learn how to be even-handed, and you have to learn how to be able to bend either way when you're working with youth, and then plan for their involvement. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in just a minute, but we'll move ahead to where we get you more involved in the conversation. No, we're not. I forgot. Never mind. Let's move. We're moving on.
We need you to explain the acronym. We
gotta explain this part first. We're talking about building positive climates. It's the end of the day, guys. Forgive me. We're building positive climates for youth, but we're going to do it in safe spaces. So safe spaces is SAFE is an acronym that we adopted from a gentleman named Chris Hampton, who is the founder of champions.org. And they developed this SAFE acronym to remind their youth and their volunteers and members to focus on the new culture that they wanted to bring into their city. When I approached Chris about using this acronym, I'm going to just kind of read for you a quote that he sent to me in an email. He said, "We wanted to create safe spaces in our community where people could feel free to be themselves, demonstrate their gifts, their talents, and abilities while providing opportunities to serve their community." And so we're talking about this threefold thing. We're talking about making sure that we notice and look for the things that are special about young people, that we provide them those opportunities to reach their community, but also we want them to move on towards success. So that threefold thing is very important. And so let's get into this SAFE acronym. So the S in safe space, the S in SAFE acronym stands for, number one, safe. Safe environments must be secure and safe for young people. Examples of these types of environments are public parks, libraries, vacant city office, school auditoriums. And for those of you who are nonprofits, typically city government is very open to providing spaces for nonprofit organizations. Also, do not forget your religious organizations and also other youth serving organizations as well for those safe spaces. The A in SAFE acronym stands for accepting. Accepting environments are open to diversity and uniqueness. I want to point out that yes, we're talking about diversity as far as color, as far as size, as far as all those things, but I do realize that there's different group settings that are a part of this the setting that we're in here today, and you have different types of groups. So also legitimacy. No one's reason is more legitimate than another person's reason for being a part of a group. So we have to make sure that diversity and uniqueness is there too, and it's open, which leads us into the F in the SAFE acronym, which is freedom of judgment and freedom of expression must exist in safe environments for youth. So that's where that comes from. We get rid of those stigmas and who's more legitimate to be here, and you know where you come from and where I come from. Where you live in the suburbs, you shouldn't be here. You don't live, you live across the track, so you shouldn't be here. So we get rid of those things that could exist, and those are the silent things that people kind of say in their minds. And when we do away with that in the beginning, in those beginning stages of everyone getting to know each other, we'll talk about that a little bit later. And we provide that in our safe space, we're better off. And then the E in safe space. It must be an empowering, encouraging, equipping environment, because we're there to empower, encourage, and equip these young people. When they leave us, they ought to be better. So Emily's gonna lead us delve a little bit deeper into these safe spaces. We're gonna turn it back on you.
Right. So we want to, yeah, we do. We're gonna throw it back on y'all, and we're gonna start with the conversation. In your work, what spaces do you interact with youth, right? So in your work or in other ways that you interact with youth, what are those spaces? We're just gonna start with that question. There we go. School. Thank you.
Big one.
Oh, and this is a word cloud. So when we see the same words, they'll get larger. And I believe you can even submit multiple times. So if you like see a word and you're like, oh, I do that one too, go ahead and type it in and it'll make it bigger. So we'll give y'all a minute to respond. School so far is the biggest. Boys and Girls Club, community organizations, online, rec centers, ooh, social media, support groups.
Oh, youth leadership group.
Okay. So yeah, so we have some virtual means. We have where youth are situated the most at the schools, right? And then through some other organizations and groups tied to it. So then keeping the SAFE acronym in mind, this idea about freedom from judgment and feeling physically safe and feeling engaged and empowered, would you consider these places safe? Either no, yes, or maybe somewhere in the middle. Okay, so we've got a little bit of safe spaces. Maybe they're safe in some capacities, but definitely room for improvement. Or maybe they're flat out just need a lot of help. So what would you say those gaps are to making these spaces safe? And again, this could be anything. This could be, you know, maybe the space isn't friendly enough for the youth. Maybe you have struggles with your organization to go ahead and support any change that you want to do to this physical space or moving the physical space. What are some of the gaps or challenges to making your spaces safe? Yep, there we go. Money, virtual environments may not be safe due to home life. Yes, understaffed, school staff doesn't have time to provide the attention needed. School administrators, yep.
People in the groups.
And so now that we're going to kind of shift gears and not enough supervision, so not having enough folks to contribute, yeah. So we're going to shift gears from some of the challenges and start thinking about maybe some of the ways we can address some of these. One thing we wanted to do is kind of show y'all the thoughts from some youth that we previously worked with, and then we asked them the same questions. How can we make our space more inviting? How can we make it more, you know, encouraging, and how can we make some of our meetings better if you're meeting with them in a very formal capacity? And they provided these solutions to us. Some of them are, of course, near impossible, like a swimming pool of stress balls, but others were a little easier to work at. Things like having more comfortable chairs, games, and snacks. You know, those were a little easier to work with. I always say that the biggest way to get me to participate is to feed me. So I feel you. I think a lot of these things are, as adults, we can also appreciate, right? Also things like on the meeting side, it was involving them in the agenda, keeping them involved in what we were going to do. So kind of like showcasing it from the very beginning, letting them help set the agenda whenever it made sense. And then other ideas were kind of doable, but maybe take a little bit more effort, like the outdoor space or having something at the end to look forward to, right? So this was just kind of their perspective from their situations. But we wanted to throw this out there so you had these ideas to consider. So you had some of the thoughts that Rhonda highlighted, where we're talking everything from the physical environment that they're in to the way they interact with the adults and like what that day-to-day kind of looks like, or the way they interact with youth. And we want to challenge y'all to say, like, how can you make your spaces, the ones that you said maybe had some gaps, safer? And so I'm going to put it up here. This is a polling question. I know it takes a minute or so to kind of text it in. But I also want to ask if anybody would be willing to speak out. If anybody in the audience has ever seen this done, right? Seen them make spaces a little bit safer, a little bit more engaging, a little bit better at interacting with youth. And if they did, if they wouldn't mind kind of unmuting yourself or putting it in the chat, and we can read off the story if you don't mind, and just kind of what worked well, or maybe how you overcame some of those challenges. Anybody have a story?
I've got one.
Okay.
So this is not part of my job, but just like in my life, I volunteer with an LGBTQ youth group, and we got basically, well, there's a huge overlap between like being queer and being neurodivergent. So most of our youth are like autistic or have ADHD or both, or many other neurodivergences. So we actually created like a sensory kind of room that's a part of our like youth group center that is good for when people are having like sensory overload, or just like need some space to like be alone and be in some quiet. And we worked, we have a youth task force that was our neurodivergent task force that came up with like what items would need to be in that room, and what is the lighting that is like more friendly versus more offensive lighting, and just things like that of like how the room should be structured to make those changes.
That's amazing. Yes, thank you. And you can see we were like diligently taking notes
Yeah.
for our own processes. That's really exciting to hear about how y'all took the time to make those opportunities. Yeah. And that goes to speak to Rhonda's earlier point about making it safe for all populations and thinking about how we think about diversity in a lot of different ways. So yeah, being aware of the population you're working with and what situations will be the most comfortable, providing the opportunities for youth to shape their own space. Exactly. And then like you shared, friendlier for neurodivergent folks. And so a lot of times that is exactly what it takes, right? Just asking them, asking the youth you work with, asking those in your groups or at your organization, what would you like, and seeing what it can take to shape those spaces. Which leads us nicely into our next little slide. This is an activity that we thought would be like a good takeaway activity. If for those of you that have a group, or for those of you who may have some kind of structured way of working with youth, we find doing this activity every once in a while, it's called the Where Am I activity, can really help kind of situate where you are and make sure everybody's on the same page. The idea is that you put signs up around the room that say things like comfortable, feeling stretched, or uncertain, and then you give reflection statements or questions really, like how do you rate your ability to use the new skill? You can also, again, use it for space, like we're talking about. So how do you feel about your role in the group? How do you feel about the group rules? And the idea is that they can go to that sign. Anybody who feels that way can congregate together. They can share their experiences. And then hopefully they'll be able to share with the rest of the group. It's just something, again, all of our slides are available to y'all. So something that you might be able to take with you at some point and try this activity out. But it goes back to exactly some of the points y'all were hitting, which is usually just starting the conversation and throwing it out there and saying, what do y'all think? How do you feel about this? And kind of understanding that perspective is a really good first step.
Absolutely. So how to make connections, we are going to play a video for you all. It's a very impactful video, and if it does not stir you and make you think and drive you, then it's just the end of the day. But I encourage you to watch this video with an open mind.
Maybe tomorrow again.
Maybe tomorrow again.
You feel a little tired right now.
But open your mind, open yourself, think about what you do currently, and watch this video.
Okay, let's see if I can get this to work. This is always my challenge, is making sure I get the audio just right.
As a kid, I mastered the art of getting kicked out of foster homes. And the fact of the matter is I trusted no one. And looking back, I guess how could I? From the time my parents left me, to the time another foster kid raped me, to the time I was bullied so bad, I tried to kill myself with a bottle of pills. So I'm sitting in the van, in the driveway of this next home, preparing to meet Rodney and Christine from Yukon, Oklahoma. He looks in my eyes and says, son, you can keep causing problems, you can keep trying to mess up, you can keep pushing us away, you can keep trying to get us to kick you out of here, but you've got to get it through your thick head, son. We don't see you as a problem. We see you as an opportunity. You see, every kid is one caring adult away from being a success story. March 2015, Harvard's National Scientific Council on the Developing Child released this study saying, and I quote, every child who winds up doing well has had at least one stable and committed relationship with a supportive adult. My friend and mentor, Reggie Joyner from Atlanta, taught me to think about it this way. In this jar are 936 marbles. Each one of these marbles represents a single week from the birth of a kid until that kid turns 18 years old. You know, a 16-year-old, you got 104 marbles remaining. Right here, we are looking at time. In fact, you're looking at all the time or all of the weeks you have left to influence this kid, or this kid before they turn 18 and begin making critical life decisions without your presence. What matters isn't how much time you have left with a particular kid that you care about. What matters is what you do with that time left. I mean, consider how many weeks Rodney had left when he bailed me out of jail. "26. I was 6 months away from graduating high school. 26 weeks to get through my thick head, my bitterness, my anger, my distrust of adults, to get me to finally accept help. You see, it's not about how much time you have left with that kid you're thinking of. What matters is what we do with that time. If every kid truly is one caring adult, one Rodney away from being a success story, then the challenge is this. The difference between a statistic and a success story is you.
See if I can get us to the next slide without shutting everything down. Okay, perfect.
So I hope that video for you all was impactful. I know that it impacted me professionally and personally as well with that one caring adult statement and a statistic that they dropped on us. It kind of gets rid of some of the stereotypes that people have said about certain issues in my life. So I was excited about that. Anyway, here we are. So he mentioned it, caring adults. Who are caring adults? Typically we say adults outside the home because when we're giving presentations like this, we're typically talking to people who are outside of the home of the young people that they work with. And so, but this can also be extended family members, coaches, teachers, mentors, people in those places in youth, in the lives of youth. They're formal and informal relationships. But the purpose of these relationships with caring adults is to basically minimize those things that are those exterior behaviors that are negative, like bullying, and then those internal mental health issues like depression.
And so we wanted to start with kind of posing the question to you all. What challenges have you heard of, or maybe you faced yourself, to being a caring adult for youth? Rhonda and I were sharing our own challenges earlier, and we both said it was like, for me, it was overcoming my perceptions that youth would think I was the stupidest person in the room, right? Understanding that, that what I have to say offers value for them and appreciate them. So what are some of the challenges that you all have? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So dealing with differences.
Yeah.
Having the time to build a relationship. Very true.
In the chat, we have Christina says, balancing conversations about safety with being a fun adult.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
very true. I think balance is a lot of what it takes to kind of incorporate
The differences.
to the different
Generations.
adjusting to differences in generations. What they are struggling with looks different than what we struggle with.
Absolutely. I was just looking at that because that's one of the topics that we do cover in our online learning collaborative, because believe it or not, that makes a difference.
Yeah. So they like to do this activity where you determine, you can probably describe it better than I do.
Yeah, so what we do is we take our community partners through an activity, and we get into groups virtually, and we have them to pick the influential person of their generation. And so we pick the generations for them, and you would be, we have some people that are from generations that when we put this together, I had never heard of. And so it's amazing because some of the things that we look for in those generational heroes or those inspirational people are some of the same things that we look for, but the generations are different, but they're the same aspects and same characteristics that we look for in each generation are the poignant things about the people that are picked.
Yeah. So it's all about trying to find the commonalities among the generations. Yeah. Overcoming their negative experiences with other adults. Yeah.
Parents who are not supportive.
Yeah. That's our challenge.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll get to maybe some solutions or thoughts about how we can address some of these things in the next slide. But we wanted to kind of give you guys one more opportunity to share your story, similar to the story that we just heard, the video we just watched. Have any of y'all ever seen or kind of heard about when an adult was being a champion for youth, or maybe you were doing it yourself? What did that look like for you? Anybody willing to? Let's see if I can get the participants back up. Somehow I made it disappear.
So I actually worked in foster care for a period of time. And I'm going to say the majority of it was pretty rough to see. There's not a lot of positive influences and consistent adults in these kids' lives. But there was one foster family I worked with in particular that was just incredible to their foster kids, and they would always take the teenagers that nobody else wanted, that were the problem kids. And just like seeing the turnaround that came when these kids would get into their home was incredible.
And what do you think some of the things that were they doing well?
I think a lot of people that go into foster care have an idea of what that's going to look like. Like, oh, I want to help these children who have nowhere to go, which is great. But a lot of people don't really see the reality where there are going to be challenges. And so I think they went in with an open mind of knowing, like, this kid is going to come in and they're going to have a lot of baggage. And there's going to be some behavioral issues due to trauma that they've been through. And I think they were very good at putting that in perspective and not having the mentality of, oh, well, this is a bad kid, they're a problem. It's not that they're a bad child, it's that they've had a horrible past. And that's carrying over into this home. They don't trust you, and these are the reasons why. And so I think their willingness to work on that with the kids and being realistic about where these kids were coming from.
Thank you for sharing. And similar to kind of the story that we just heard, it's a lot about kind of, yeah, being, like you said, being open-minded, offering that support even when it may be thrown back at you. Maybe trying to be a little bit more persistent than you normally would with like working with another adult, right? So things along those lines. Throw it back to Rhonda to kind of elaborate a little bit more about who and what caring adults look like.
Yeah, so I pose this question again because we're going to talk about it a bit differently. So who and what are caring adults? So a caring adult is an adult. These are adults that understand the value and the importance of human connection. They don't walk in the room simply just say, hey, let's get this meeting started so I can go home because I have kids too. That's not that's not how we participate as caring adults. But these are adults that are willing to put their script to the side, their agenda to the side, and make sure that youth are heard. Make sure that they create the time and the space to invite youth in to be a part of the discussion. Secondly, these are adults who seek to understand rather than to enforce their need to be understood. And sometimes we just kind of like to be in charge as adults, and we like to remind everybody what the rules are, and we focus on nothing but the rules and how they should be carrying themselves, and we don't take the time to read the room. So when we're doing groups, or we're doing discussion with our youth, or we're planning events, it's meeting day, we got to meet with them. Sometimes it's just to walk in the room and read the room. If the morale seems to be low, if it just seems to be off, then it may be time to maybe implement an activity, or it may be time to just stop and ask you, how's everybody doing today? That may be the discussion. That it may not be that we're going to meet our goals and talk about what we said we were going to talk about last week. It may not be that we're going to get this specific thing done, but there may be a need to express something that youth are dealing with that day. And that's the time and the place to make sure that we're not so worried about the rules and, what we can. And sometimes you may have to alter the group rules of how you discuss things, because it may be a time that somebody needs to share something that's affecting them in a way that if they go any further, it may be to their detriment. So that's how we do that. And then caring adults model affirmations before they teach them. So when you walk in the room, be the representation of what you want to see. If you want that environment to be positive, you need to be positive every time you hit the door. You need to have something positive coming off of your lips every time that you speak. If you want the atmosphere to be exciting, you need to be exciting. There's nothing more than being in a room and you're there. Maybe you want to be there, maybe you don't want to be, maybe just there out of obligation. But when you're in that room and somebody hits that door that is excited, it is something about an excited person hitting a room that makes that room turn around. And so you be the excitement. You be that one piece of excitement. When you walk in that door, they're glad to see you, because you come, you meet them with a smile, you meet them with positivity, and you meet them with the affirmation that let's get ready, let's go. They're ready to go. And then the fourth one is that adults. These are adults that focus on what youth do well and promote growth in those areas. When you see the talents, the abilities of young people, and you see potential, it ought to make your mind, the wheels of your mind start turning. And you've got to figure out, say, how do I get you from A to B? And how do I get you from what you are now, from just having potential, to get you to that where I know you can go? And then what can we create in this space that's going to promote your success? So that's who caring adults are, and that's what they do.
And similar, we kind of talk to youth themselves and ask them, what do they like about working with adults? What makes a caring adult from their perspective? And I think you can kind of read this feedback straight off the slide here and kind of maybe make your own connections. I always feel like it's exactly how I personally want to be treated when working with others, right? We don't want people to boss us around or pretend they're listening to us and not taking us seriously, or thinking that we lack our capabilities of doing something. And then in turn, when we feel more connected to people, it's through being listened to. It's through being nice and approachable, and just kind of being there for them, and trying to be as relatable and as connecting as possible. And so I think it's kind of, we talk about all the things it could look like, but it also just kind of is helpful to see that, like, at the core, it's just kind of being yourself and being open and connecting with folks and letting them know they have value, whether you're talking to other adults or talking to youth, I think.
Absolutely. And so this last thing for the caring adult section of presentations, just some tips for me. And just number one, always begin your interactions with an affirmation with either it can be spoken or just with your demeanor. Sometimes we say more with our demeanor than we do with our mouths. And so, like I said previously, always be an affirmation before you teach it. All of your participatory behavior that you want to see, do it. So if you want them, this to be a very participatory environment, you need to be willing to participate. So pick your activities well. The other thing is, I know that some groups have to be regimented because there are certain rules and things that we have to go by when we're in certain environments. So keep your procedures regimented until the group agrees on a different structure. So if it's a different structure or group style, that's fine. That's within the constraints of how you are supposed to do things for your organization. That's fine. But this is going to help that group tonight. This is going to help the group dynamic. dynamics. It's going to build understanding and trust in your organization or group. And then lastly, be intentional, be honest, and be genuine, because you can see right through you when you're not being those things. We're going to move right into how to engage in meaningful ways. I'm going to pair two things together. So I'm going to pair the 4 stages of group dynamics together with the 3 levels of meaningful engagement for positive youth development and youth adult partnerships. So the phases of group development are forming, storming, norming, and performing. And those 3 levels of meaningful youth engagement are participation, voice and consultation, and shared leadership. I've made sure that they've been paired with the ones that they go with. So participation and the stage of forming and group dynamics are very parallel, because during this stage, everyone is getting to know each other. They're getting to know the organization, how it works. They're also, all those different little bitty assigned tasks that everybody does to work together. They're getting those things. So this is just, I'm a getting to know you phase, and I'm getting to know the organization. Here are the rules of the organization. This is how we participate. Same thing in the participation phase of meaningful roles for youth and a youth partnership. As you matriculate through the organization, you'll meet that storming and norming group dynamic under voice and consultation. This stage is very important, and there's 3 reasons why. Because at this stage, the group has not gelled yet. They're moving from 2 schools of thinking. They're moving from thinking as an individual to thinking as a group member. So are thinking at, some of us have groups, some of us are working with youth coalitions, some of us are working with youth community groups. And so they're moving from thinking as an individual to thinking as a group member. So there's going to be times where you're going to be asking them for information. Youth are not going to always say things that adults agree with, and adults are going to say things that youth don't agree with, and then youth have to deal with disagreements with their peers. And so at this phase, 3 things are important. Number 1, you're going to have to establish how to deal with conflict, how to deal with conflict resolution as a group. Number 2, you're going to have to deal with how the group makes decisions. And number 3, you're going to have to decide which roles everybody is going to play. So after this stage is done and you move into norming, what should happen is, number 1, you have a structure, and the group has a culture, and the group has leadership. It should have a foundation. That's the foundation of your group. And you move into that norming because we have a way that we do things. We have a process of how we handle our conflict. We have a process of making decisions, and we have leaders to help us do it. And then we move into our shared leadership. And this is where we can perform. And you can't do that if you don't go through that storming and norming phase. It's not going to work if you don't storm and norm. You cannot perform. And so this is a diagram that we adopted from the Youth Commission from Virginia. And these are the meaningful roles for young people. If you notice at each stage, there are opportunities for youth to participate. And we talked about early on, Emily talked about early on, when the opportunities for youth to participate, when they participate, each level is going to build skills. And the reason why you want that to happen is because if you want them to be participants and move into voice and consultation, then you're going to have opportunities that build the skills for them to have voice and be consulted in a way where their voice is impactful to things that are constructive for the organization. So because if they're not able to do that, when you bring youth and adults together, there's nothing more that causes disequilibrium than when you bring somebody to a table that's not prepared to be there. So you want to make sure that youth are prepared to be at the table that you're sitting them at. And so when they learn to be, perform advocacy, or they learn to be in these youth forums, and maybe you want to change something about the group, so you put a little small group together to ask, well, what's not going right about what we're doing? Why does it just seem like people do not want to participate? Nobody really wants to talk. Well, what's really going on? You want to make sure that you prepare them in such a way that when you make decisions, you move up to shared leadership, they can contribute in a way that's going to be mobilize your group or your organization in forward motion. You don't want to be standing still when you go through these processes. And so this is a meaningful activity that we put together for you all to help you better understand the things that you should be asking yourself at each level. So at the participation level, you should be asking yourself, how will you participate to learn the group and organization and how it functions? What activities are available or should be available? So what should be available in your organization, how your organization is structured, what should be available at this level to help youth participate and build the skills they need to move to voice and consultation. And then at voice and consultation, how will youth be consulted? What is it that you want? What is it that you want to know youth? What do you want them to contribute to the organization? And what activities are you put in place to support this level for them to move into shared leadership? And then a question for adults. What responsibilities and leadership spaces are adults willing to share with them? Because you can't get them to the point to where you want to consult them and have shared leadership with them and you're not prepared to share the spaces.
So this is one of those activities that we think y'all could take away with you. You could reflect on it on your own or bring it to your group and start brainstorming together about ways you can incorporate some of these activities and move up in the participation structures. But we just kind of did want to have one little like kind of self-reflection for this section, and then we were going to wrap it up with a full discussion on everything that we talked about today and all the content that we gave you. We know we threw a lot at you.
No.
But thinking about your own organization, for those of you, like what opportunities do you already have in place for youth to participate? Some of y'all mentioned groups already. So is there anything else, or you can just re-echo your groups? What opportunities do you already have in place for you to kind of participate and engage with your work? Here we go.
Leadership groups and schools.
Okay, we have some groups. Is that a mix of youth and adults or just youth? Leadership program, youth advisory council,
That's
perfect.
good.
Great. Okay, so you guys are already pretty well primed, or many of you already have kind of groups in place or opportunities to really kind of help bring you to the table. So you may already be kind of at that participation stage and be ready to move them further along up the ladder.
Great news for there. Okay.
Time experience,
Oh,
and we're able to. Yeah. Perfect. I'm just gonna go straight to the discussion.
That'll hurt.
We want to make sure we have lots of time for the discussion. So again, we threw a lot at you. You know, we talked in a variety of manners about how positive youth development is about the spaces and the people and the opportunities to engage. So thinking about your organization and thinking that you have control over everything in your organization, right, hypothetically, what would you change first to better implement positive youth development in your organization? Let's see how y'all, what would you want to change first? More funding, there we go.
Money.
That's reasonable. Dream role of youth on the board. I think that means like an advisory board, a leadership board, like I'm blanking on the word.
Dedicated youth program. Pitch.
We just pitch in where we can. You want to make it a little more structured. The idea that youth work is seen as a project rather than meaningful at all levels of your work. Yeah, that's important. And it's not integrated in a day-to-day. And so then I'm going to pose you guys the next question. What would be the most challenging aspect to change? We're probably going to see money again. I predict money will come up here. Funding, there we go. Thank you. Leadership, getting your admin support. Yep. That's a pretty common struggle. Adultism.
Mhm.
Adultism of the leadership. We combine multiple. Okay. Funding. Okay. And then let's think about some of the strengths. What are you or your organization's strengths in implementing PYD? Again, some of you already have some groups, or already have youth that are involved in some capacity or another. Maybe you already have some caring adults that you can like identify yourself. Maybe your space is already relatively safe, or it's on the way to being there. What are some of your strengths? While people are texting in, I also want to say, I think one of the strengths that each of y'all have is that you're kind of here with us today. So, in our program, we're often working with organizations, and I frequently get the question, like, what are we looking for in an organization? What are the requirements to come be a community partner with you all? Like, what does it look like? Do we need this many youth? Do we have to focus on this? Do we need to do this? And I tell them repeatedly over and over again, what it really comes down to is just, and somebody said it on the screen, is just having people who care, having adults who want to do this, who are invested in this idea of working with youth. And usually if I have a couple of adults that are willing to come join us and learn more about us, we can build a lot of the other aspects around it. We can kind of offer those supports in doing so. But it comes down to what we like to call the caring adults as kind of the foundation, and then kind of adding those and integrating a lot of that stuff and standardizing it. And so the last question, I'm going to give you a minute to reflect on this, and then Rhonda and I will probably throw in some of our own thoughts. But again, we threw a lot at you today. We talked about all sorts of different challenges. If you had to walk out of here with just kind of one tip or one next step on how you could increase positive youth development in your work, or implement positive youth development in your work, what would you do? Or how would you help? Or what would you encourage others to do? Some of those we're talking about leadership and getting leadership on board. Rhonda,
Right.
I know you've done that.
Yeah.
What are some of your tips on building up leadership and getting the admin to agree that working with youth is important?
Sometimes that is a hard, that's a hard staircase to climb. However, I think the most important thing that you can do is continue to do meaningful things with youth and build a community of support that speaks louder than you do. And so the things that you do with your youth, the things that you're doing in the community, they should echo. And those are the things that cause changes in the administration. The more that I became youth involved with youth, and the more that youth impacted their communities, the louder the sound got. And I was able to get those supports, do things that support those activities and promote those activities as much as you can, because you want not just the attention of the admin, but the attention of the admin's admin. And so you be coordinating that type of group is it's very important to make sure that it's multifaceted. So you are always thinking about the youth and how to best make sure that you'll, I don't know how to say this other than you end up becoming a part of the community that you serve by serving the youth. Mm-hmm. You just do. And so that's what you do. Make loud impact.
I think that also speaks to the moving from projects to more
Yes,
integration.
That's right.
you know, projects are kind of an easy way to start in a
Mhm,
sense, because people look at this as, oh, it's gonna be short term. Oh, I don't have to commit that much. But then taking it to that next level, when you can show how the project has taken, has had some positive outcomes and really promote that, then you can start building more and more of that integration.
I think somebody said it better than me.
What is,
Structures that provide youth with a platform.
yeah,
That's where we want, that's where you want to take this. And that is how you get that change in admin as well.
yeah. And again, we encourage positive youth development in all kinds of manners. So even if you just start with like talking to the folks at your organization and seeing how many of them may be interested in being a caring adult, talking to the youth that are in your group, seeing how they feel about certain things, maybe look at where they want to go next, and thinking about what they would want to address next in their community or next issues, or how they could be more involved in doing more of that shared leadership. Any of that is just kind of a step in that right direction. So I hope we, you know, at least kind of inspired you all today to get, just kind of start your thoughts going. You know, we had no expectations to change the world in 1 hour and a half long presentation, but we think anytime that you can start being more intentional about incorporating this positive youth development, and any, you know, resources or anything that you may need to help. So we're going to go ahead and open the floor to any questions, and we have a little bit of time as you're thinking about them. We also invite you to, one, check out our website, and there's our email address if you so need to. I didn't give them a shout out earlier, but our website highlights a lot of our community partners and a lot of the great work they're doing. They're totally an inspiration. Then the second link, or the middle section here, is the evaluation for the presentation for our own purposes, for our TN purposes. You can either use this link or you can do the little QR code. On the next slide, I will have the evaluation code for TOS's purposes. So are there any questions or any last, oh, and Hala put it in the chat too. Any last moment thoughts, any other thing? Oh, I'm catching up on the chat now. So I'm reading about Mr. Rogers. Thank y'all. Attitudes are caught, not taught. That's so sweet. Any other questions or anything else that y'all want to get out of today? Anything you want to share, either that's worked for you or, you know, that you're struggling with that maybe we can chat about for a minute? Blocking things. I'm not sure what I can feel.
As y'all are thinking, I do want to just remind y'all about game night, and also thank you, Rhonda and Emily. I know last workshop, everyone's like a little zoomed out, but I think we all got so much out of just participating and engaging together. So thank you both for leading this workshop and creating this space for us. And a reminder, you can access their PowerPoint or their PDF of their mentee on the materials page, and I'll pop that link again in the chat as well.
Thank you. This is the evaluation code for the Institute purposes. So if y'all want to go ahead and complete that one too. But yeah, I can't thank y'all enough for joining us today. It was a lot of fun for us to kind of think about ways that we could engage these kind of virtual audiences and, you know, talk about issues that are prevalent in positive youth development and how to overcome them. I'm going to give you one last little slide because that is all of our social media. If you would like to connect with us on social media, it makes our communications person so happy when she gets a new follower. But this is a good way to follow up with anything else that we are doing besides the website and things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and exit on my screen. I hope that was enough up there long enough. But if you need anything else, please don't hesitate to reach out with us. Again, we were just really excited to be here and get to chat with you all. We had realized that you'll have some particularly sensitive situations and deal with populations that are, you know, have additional challenges. And so it's just always great to kind of hear about how positive youth development can be integrated into all those situations.
Thank y'all so much. If no one has anything else, I mean, we still have time, so feel free to stay on, but if not, I'm gonna go ahead and, I'll play some music as y'all pop out. Melanie,